Hello, my name is Dr. Maya Byfield. My business is the Phenomenal STEMist. I'm so excited to be here in Orange County because it's where I live. I live in Apopka, Florida. And I decided to make this business because I saw a need for underrepresented students to be successful in STEM, which stands for science, technology, engineering, math. And the best way I can do that is just provide products for parents to prepare them, whether it's a book or online STEM camps or just video podcasting. My goal is to transform this community, especially those who are underrepresented. And the way to do that is to help parents understand their children's minds and basically develop them at different stages of their lives to be prepared for a successful STEM career. Thank you so much. That's why I'm here. Hey, 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 it's the Phenomenal STEMist. Good evening, everyone. I am so excited to be here tonight with Jamal Hardage. Jamal, how are you?
I'm doing good, doing good.
Listen, Jamal is my friend. I'm gonna start off with saying that he's my friend. And,
Yes,
and
yes,
those of
yes.
you who are watching, do me a favor and tell me where you're watching from. Just put it in the chat. Don't forget, to let me just do a little bit of homework here. Get that book, The Phenomenal STEMist. You watch all these videos, you're learning about all these STEMists. Well, you need to get your own career, and no better than getting that book on Amazon right now. And this summer is that time to start preparing for a Phenomenal STEM camp. Or if you want to do a year program or a 3 month prep program, don't forget on www.phenomenalstemist.com to get virtually prepared in STEM. All right, I have Jamal Hardage with me. Listen, he is originally from Orlando, Florida, and he is a director of software or automation software development. And he has a bachelor's degree in computer science from Rollins College here in Winter Park, Florida, along with a master's of business administration. He is well prepared, and he's going to tell us his process. How are you doing, Jamal?
I'm doing good, man. Doing good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm going to start off with the first question. The first question: when did you fall in love with your discipline? When did you fall in love with your discipline?
This is an interesting one because I really didn't fall in love with it, right? It kind of kept tracking me down.
Mm.
So, real early on, I was super blessed to have parents that kind of poured into us. So for me, they poured into computers because that's what I gravitated to. My brother, they poured into swimming because he excelled in that, right? Um, but for me, my dad ran a business and he had a computer, and in the time he had the computer, it was kind of a novelty, right? Because
Mm.
that was early 90s, you know what I mean? And so he had it. At some point he was able to bring it home, and we always had compute, to an extent, a computer in the house. And so got me a disc on DOS, and I went through it.
Oh, DOS.
And
In the
yeah, and so, in the 90s. It might actually, tell you the truth, it might have been
90s.
early. It might have been early 80s. Yeah, it
Yeah,
might have been early 80s because this was before like the Windows thing really caught on, like Windows 3.1 and all
yeah.
that. So it might have been in the 80s, but like, this was like when 8086s and all those computers like the XT and all that were around. And so, I took to it really good. And then I left it because, I treated it kind of like a toy, and then, brought it back. And, I was fortunate enough that, you know, he let me break it. And then, a guy named Mr. Larry would come to the house, he'd fix it, and I'd be over his shoulder watching and understanding how to do things. And so, throughout that process of me doing that, was able to do that. Then I was able to get into bulletin boards when after my interest kind of waned, because as a kid, you're jumping back and forth. Got into bulletin boards, which was there a little bit before the internet started taking fire. That was the way that people kind of communicated. And so, I was able to set up bulletin boards and got into communities, and then, kind of waned again. And then, I find, you find some other plug. And so it's always kind of been pulling me, and then when the internet came out, I understood how to do websites, and I understood how to build computers. I understood all these things, build networks. And so everything it just all kind of came together. And so even when I started school, I'm just like, look, I'm going to get it. Yeah, I told you, electrical engineering, right? I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
get rid of all the computer science stuff. I've already done programming, all that, and I want to do something
As
different.
a kid, as a kid,
Yeah. And so then, I still end up with computer science, still computer programming. And so, it always kind of,
following me. It's following me. It's
it
chasing me
always tracked me
down.
down. And so I've always been pretty good at it. And so it's just, it's just always there.
Wow, Jamal. Hearing your story, when I heard you say DOS, I'm like, that's 80s.
Mm,
And
yeah, it might have been.
you hear yourself say bulletin boards.
Hmm.
Like, I don't remember, and I'm older than you.
Hmm.
I don't remember bulletin boards. The first technology I remember was, well, I remember having my dad brought a computer home,
Hmm.
but we didn't know how to use it. He had an Apple II too,
Okay.
Apple II home.
Okay.
My father was cutting edge. He was
Hmm.
they were targeting learning centers to put Apple IIs in the daycare centers. And so he was recruiting. They were recruiting him, and he said, "Yes, you could bring the Apple II into it." So I know, children in his learning center were using computers, and that's in the '80s. And he brought
Yeah.
one home, but we just didn't know how to use it. I
Yeah, it was
remember
a novelty.
it was. I didn't know how to use it. It was just sitting in. It was sitting. I remember it was sitting in the room. I would turn it on from time to time and try to play with it, but I didn't know what to do with it. It wasn't until my cousin later on, I would just use word processor to do my homework.
Hmm.
Until he gave me his old Windows 95 computer.
Hmm.
Windows 95. That means it wasn't until my junior year in high school. That's when I was a junior in high school when I first learned how to use a computer and how it could work for me. What I'm hearing from you were a bulletin board. That sounds like something that was pre-internet. Like, it was
Yeah.
some kind of computer-wide way to communicate with people before the internet. Your
Mhm.
parents had you on that. That means they had you cutting edge, bro.
Well,
Or
the thing is that they really didn't. It wasn't so much they had me on it. It
yeah,
was
they gave you access to it.
yeah, they gave you access. So and that's what I'm saying. Like they fostered, which was amazing, because what would happen is, say for instance, we have the machine there. I understood how to work DOS. I understood, the word processing, understood the networking, did all this stuff, and then it's just like, okay, you know what, this over here does this. So all right, Dad, I need a modem. You know what I mean? Can I get a modem? Okay, here's a modem. Whatever. Go do what you want. Do your thing with it, right? And then I load the software up and create my own thing. So the bulletin boards were kind of like your own way of creating AOL and
Yeah.
CompuServe and all that stuff. Yeah, so you would go, you design your own screens and all that fun stuff, and then people could call in and access stuff. So like files that you had, or create messages, things like that. So
Now I
yeah,
understand
so
it.
and so they had to. It's funny because now that you mention it, like I always think it was early '90s, but really it went because Windows 95. I remember it was we were doing it before this stuff, and so it
Right.
had to. Yeah, it had to be like late '80s, right? It had to be
Yeah.
like '88, '89, maybe
Yeah.
seven. So yeah. So I was young, pretty much. I was young playing with this stuff. And so,
Your parents gave you access to technology that most people did not even hear about
yeah,
early.
yeah.
And so you wonder why it followed you. It happened early. It
Yeah,
happened.
and one thing I'll plug too is, it's one of those things where we weren't rich, right? So it
Mhm.
wasn't because we just had money that they could just pour the stuff in. It was because like they made sacrifices for it, and
Wow.
it's one of those things that kind of sticks with me too, because you want to be cutting edge, but buying a computer and letting your son kind of destroy it, build it back, destroy it again, build it back, that takes a level of like patience, you know what I mean? And not only that too, like, okay, we still got a mortgage here. And so,
Right.
but I'm gonna buy my son this computer, right? You know what I mean? And so, yeah, it was a good thing. It was a blessing. And so, all these years later, it kind of paid off.
Paid off. Paid off. What an honor to your parents. So parents out there, give your kids access and be patient as they break it.
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny because I ran across the guy, Larry Morgan, and I've always had like black excellence in my life. I try to let people know this, but this guy that worked at IBM, and so I have no idea. My dad was selling insurance, like he was plugged into the community and all that stuff, and so um, he worked at IBM, but he would just come and fix the stuff for us. But he was without him even knowing it, he was teaching me like because I ran into him years ago, like after my consulting company, after all this stuff, and I'm just like, what's going on? I haven't seen you in like 30 years, you know what I mean? And I'm like, because of you, I was able to learn how to do this stuff. And he was just like, well, he wasn't even thinking about it, right? And so yeah, but without that, there's a huge piece or a huge gap that probably wouldn't have happened. So
The
yeah.
power of the network. The
Hmm.
power of network. And like just like he's low key, you're low key. And now you're on my YouTube channel and you're gonna impact so many other people in a low key way. And that's the power of a network and that's power of humility. It goes
Mhm.
way further than bombosity. All right, let's move on. Number
Yeah.
two. Number two, what tools did you use to discipline yourself to succeed? What tools did you discipline yourself to succeed?
This is an interesting one. To me, I don't know if I can point to physical tools. I think the I think it's more of a discipline of a kind of like the mind. Like where for me, when I work with computers or when I do something, even if it's not computers, even if it's business or something like that, the what I'm always trying to find out is the root, like why. And if I can understand the underlying structure, then I can kind of work my way up and understand why people do what they do or why a certain thing is the way that it is. And so the tools that I use were really just books, right? So
Mhm.
if I need to learn something, or if I want to learn something, I start out with trying to find out, even if it's the most rudimentary book on the topic, right? I kind of start from there and then build up with the idea of how do I do this the right way.
Mhm.
Um, and so I don't know if that makes a ton of sense, but the foundation really is just reading and wanting to do it the right way.
Mhm.
So with programming, for instance, like for most of my life, I knew about programming, right? I understood programming, but I never felt like I was a professional at it.
Mhm.
It wasn't until I got hired at a place and saw the profession, like how they did it professionally, that I could say, okay, you know what, this is what it looks like. And then I couldn't stop there, right? It's like, okay, I see it. Now I have to actually understand it and do it, right? And
Mhm.
so
Practice it. Yeah, practice.
exactly, exactly. So
Yeah.
within that space, out of people that I got hired with, right? There's two groups. You have the group that says, okay, you know what? This is how it looks professionally. I'm going to understand that. I'm gonna digest it, and I'm going to to kind of either replicate it or get better at it. Then there's the other group that's saying, okay, you know what? I know enough programming to get by, right? I know enough to make it. And I think that the discipline would be, all right, you know what? You have to step beyond just, okay, you know what? I know enough to actually to fulfill my obligation, right? And you have to understand, okay, this is the right way. Like for me, I'm the type of person, I will be okay if I don't do it in the speed you want, or if I don't do it really even to an extent in the manner you want, but it's done correctly, right? So yeah, just said my tools of discipline is just okay. You know what? I understand that needs to get done, all right. But what's the proper way to do it? And then once we understand that, if we need to make deviations or if we need to kind of tweak it, that's fine. But we got to start it at the base level.
Wow, wow, wow. So what I'm hearing from you is diligence,
Mm-hmm.
innovation, like you gotta know the stuff first. Gotta know it. Gotta the foundation is just read a book.
Yeah,
um,
you know,
and then don't stop there.
yeah.
Because with computer science it's always evolving. If you stop there,
You're always going to be left behind, and I think that's the problem that a lot of computer scientists, and even just, I don't want to say STEM fields in general, but the issue is that we kind of, you can get complacent. So like if you go in, you get a job. The good thing about STEM jobs is most of them pay well, most of them are good jobs, right? So you go in there, you get a job, and because it pays well and you get cushy, right? You just sit
yeah,
and you do the same
right.
thing over and over, right? And
Yeah,
so, yeah, so the problem with that becomes, if there is turnover, right, or if you do you get lost in the shuffle, then it's like, okay, you know what? Hey, these skills are skills from 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Like that's not gonna make it right now, right? You had the skills for that particular job in that particular time, and
yeah.
so staying relevant is critical. It's critical.
Listen to me. Listen, and I feel like now more than ever, technology has entered into every STEM space,
Hmm.
and therefore nobody is safe. So life scientists used to be like, and I don't think even life scientists really recognize this. I'm telling you, life scientists out there right now, if you don't up your skill set, you're gonna get lost. Life scientists, we our lives, it doesn't change much. So I
Hmm.
teach biology, and
Hmm.
this our biology, it's the same information. It's very difficult to change textbooks. We do a lot of experimentation over a long period of time to discover things about, let's say, the cell, cellular respiration, etc., like that. I teach pretty much the same thing. However, now that computers have gotten in the mix of life sciences, there are some skill sets that I learned 20 years ago that are out of
Hmm.
date.
Yeah.
Nobody's like, no longer will we be developing proteins from bacteria. We're going to be using computer models, artificial intelligence to model proteins. So something that would take 5 years to develop via wet lab work is
Hmm.
taking less than a year via artificial intelligence.
and,
It's
and
crazy.
so
There's nobody is safe anymore.
not nobody's safe. And so the whole idea of like the area I work in, right? The team that I'm on is essentially to kind of to automate the role of the scientist, right? Not to eliminate the scientist, right? Because you need the scientist, but if you automate the role to be alongside the scientist, then it gives them that much more throughput. Does that make sense? So like
Yeah.
now they can say, okay, now they can actually do scientist work, and that's the whole idea, is that you're paying scientists to be scientists, right? You're not paying them to copy and paste. You're not paying them to, um, to take the data from the instrument, put it into this program, and to run standard deviations or get curves or anything. Like, you're not paying them for that. They already understand that stuff. What you're trying to do is, what is the output of that, right? And so yeah, the stuff in the middle kind of gets lost in the shuffle. And so the role of the technicians and all that stuff now is just to facilitate that process, right? And so yeah, it's changing, man. And life science is it's touching everything. It's
It's
touching everything.
it's touching
Hmm.
everything, and if you don't know how to, if you're stuck in wet lab work and
Hmm.
not learning automation work, you're gonna get left in the
Yeah,
shuffle.
that's this is
That's
this
what I'm
is this is
saying. So back in the days, we would say, "Oh, the computer sciences, that's what's changing all the thing," and they'll have to learn things new all the time. Now we're entering the life sciences field where we're going to be having to constantly update just as much as the computer scientists.
yeah. We run into problems all the time. I don't, let me not, we don't run into problems, but it's tough sometimes to fill the position of of the technician on the automation line.
That's right.
So, and that's the trickiest part. So like if what we're doing is we're putting these automation machines inside of these buildings so the scientists could run their things. But the issue becomes, okay, you put this machine into a building, all right, it has to you still have to program it, right? And so, we need people that can say, okay, we have this liquid handler, and this is what we want it to do, right? We wanted to pipette, we needed to incubate, we needed to do these things, and we need it for these amount of times. And so that's a specialized area, as opposed to just having the manual people in the labs doing this. So the
Yeah.
automated way, as I said, it doesn't like this, like as of right now that you still need both. But
Right now, you
what
need both.
happens, yeah, but what happens is that if you're stuck in the wet lab, like, there's this whole nother industry here that you could be a part of, if your mind is geared towards the STEM field.
Actually, exactly. So we're gonna get into that shortly when we talk about what you do. But let's look at the next question. What were your challenges in school? So you have a bachelor's in computer science,
Hmm.
you have a master's in business administration, but it wasn't as easy as one, two, three. Talk to me about it. What was some
Yeah,
like?
no,
What
yeah,
was your
yeah,
path?
yeah,
From your path, and then
yeah.
some of the challenges.
Yeah, my path was a little interesting because school isn't really I'm not super great at it. You know what I mean? It's not something that I'm passionate about, not something that I'm super super great at. And so it was always a struggle, right? I told you I went to school initially for electrical engineering, and so battling through Calc 1 through 3, and then the physics and all that stuff, and then going up to static, like all those things are just diff EQ. It was just a grind. And so
Let you know, diff EQ stands for differential
until
equations.
equation, yeah,
Another
yeah.
high level math class.
Yeah, yeah. So struggling through those, there's some people, I look at people like the Byfields and all those that just breeze through the classes, and I just put my, and so I don't know. So it was a struggle for me, but I ended up just like you were saying, going in and finishing up at Rollins with my computer science and my MBA. And so there's two ways I like to look at this, right? Especially in the STEM field, like actually both of the fields that I'm in, STEM and business, right? Technically, you don't need a degree for either, right? You can go in, and as long as you are diligent about what you're doing and you have tenacity, then you're going to be great, right? So for the field we're in, um, a lot of it just depends on how well you can perform the task. So if you have the skills, there's not too much stopping you because the demand is so high. And so technically, like if you go through and you read the books and you understand and you want to be professional with it, there's a place for you, right? The one thing I would say about the degree is there's sometimes and you've mentioned this before a bunch of times on it, it opens up some doors that you wouldn't be able to get to otherwise.
Hmm.
So there's some jobs that although you have the skills for, they may still want a 4-year degree, right? Or, the experience is just, okay, we want 15, I mean, so much experience that it'd be a hurdle, especially if you're just starting out. Um, and that's the rub, even with business, if you start and you have the tenacity and you start ending up managing people, managing budgets, then you start working your way up, you have that skill. So it's transferable.
Hmm.
But yeah, the degree sometimes it unlocks doors that you wouldn't otherwise get to. So it was still it was still good for me to get. And I tell the story all the time about why I went and got it. So I went and I initially there was a part of time where I was like, man, I don't think I'm ever gonna get it. I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing because it wasn't bad. I had my business going, things were still going good. But I was going for a contract and I was sitting down with a guy. It was one of the largest contracts I was going after. And we were sitting and he took me to eat at this crazy Chinese spot. And he's like, what school did you graduate from? I'm just like, I hadn't graduated from college. And he's like, you didn't go to college? He's like, man, he just went in and started lambasting me, like, what are you doing? And I'm just like, I never want that feeling again. And
Hmm.
so I went in and then I got my stuff and it was pretty much to show that, hey, you know what? If I need to get this piece of paper, I'll get it, and keep moving. But it's one of those where I didn't want to put myself in a position to not be able to get business, to not be able to get a job, not be able to make it to the next level because I didn't have it.
Have it. I love that.
Hmm.
And so many people are plugging on the media. Oh, you don't need it. You don't need it. You don't need it. And granted, there are many positions in which you don't need a bachelor's degree. Uh, but I'm telling you, as African Americans, it opens doors that usually are closed to us. There are a lot of doors closed to us, especially in leadership. We're talking to the director of automation software development. He's not getting that position as a black man without a degree. It's
Yeah, now
just
it's
go
yeah
ahead.
that was actually one of the requirements for getting a job at Sanofi, right? The degree, right? And so that allowed me to actually even apply. So if I wouldn't have had that, I probably wouldn't be at Sanofi because when you start looking at a company like Sanofi, they're not a software development company. So because they're heavy in research, because they're heavy in science, right? Their mindset is degree focused, right? It's like if you,
They're
yeah, it's like,
academic.
yeah, they're academic. And so, there's a bunch of companies where the academics doesn't really play a role. Like, okay, you know what, we're just trying to get the job done. But, for a company like that, or like a serious engineering company or serious development company,
And government
um,
contracts, Jamal.
government, yeah,
Government
yeah.
contracts where heavy money is moved through government
Hmm.
contracts. They're looking
Hmm.
for degrees. They're looking for leadership.
Hmm. And so that's where it came out. And the NBA that did kind of where I was at. That's kind of the time where I was moving from like technician, like okay, senior developer to a management role. And so that kind of made it jump. Although same team, almost the same work, it kind of it moved the needle. And I don't think I would have been able to get the promotion, been able to move like I moved without getting that because again, the company is research like academic focus. So in order to move up, they look at that, right? It's important, and so yeah, it's definitely needed.
So, what I'm hearing, your challenge was the fact that you had to go.
To an extent, it's just said it's an interesting thing because yeah, it's interesting because I was before this, I was running my own business, right? And
Yeah,
so and when you're doing that, it really wasn't a criteria.
yeah.
But again, when I'm sitting down with somebody and they do ask the question, right? They're trying to put their business in my hands. And so when you don't really have responses to stuff like that, it becomes like yeah, it kind of diminishes like your capacity, like, okay, you didn't follow the steps.
Yeah.
You see? And so
Love that. Love that. Wow. So
mhm.
that's a real answer. And I really hope people take that in. especially where people are trying to not go that route or take shortcuts. You're limited. That's what I'm
Mhm.
hearing. Okay, so you talked about Sanofi. Sanofi is a life science pharmaceutical company. That's where you are the director of software, automation software development. So tell me a little bit about what you do. Like, tell me a typical day in your line of work. Your typical day.
Yeah, a typical day for me is pretty much building applications to make the scientists' life easier, right? So when they want to automate an experiment, they can do so and then still be able to get the data that they need and process it, right? Because it's easy when you're doing it by hand, because it's only 96 wells or 384 or these. But if you multiply that by 10 or 20, now it's just a ton of data. So the goal here is to say, okay, it's a lot of data coming off the machine. How can we actually take that, process it, and either get it to a specific place for storage, get it to a specific place to be analyzed, get it to a space where people can, actually use it. And so that's pretty much what we do on a daily basis. And so yeah, that's my job. And even if it's not so much a software automation side, sometimes data scientists still end up with a pool of data where it's just like, okay, you know what, I need to move this from A to B, and so that's where we step in and kind of try to help out.
So you have a team under you in which they work with scientists. Do scientists reach out to you and say, "This is what I need"? Like, how is the interaction there? Are you a
Well, it's a
You're
little bit of
remote,
both.
right?
So
Do you
yeah. All my team and the team in general is remote. So we're here. There's two sides. So there's my side, which is software development, and then there's the other side, which is actually the automation lines. So where we actually construct the automation lines to for experiments, right?
got you.
And so trying to standardize as well, just to make sure that all the sites, have different, the same type of things. And so yeah, for me, we have what is it? We have people all over the like we have developers all over the place. So it works out well because when we're fielding work, we actually aren't limited to just Orlando. So we're able to get good developers who can, perform the tasks and kind of get this data moving. But yeah, no, we're all home and we're all cranking through it.
So you're working with different people from around the country, around the world.
Yeah, so we have developer like I have one developer that's in Japan. I have one that's
Wow.
in what is it? Actually, they're in France. Like I have two in France, and then one here in Orlando, and another one here that's about to start in Orlando. So they're yeah, we're scattered out, and yeah, it's just that it works out really well, because the time zones kind of overlap well, and yeah, everything.
Wow, wow, wow. Okay, so what are your challenges? And then what are your favorite parts? Let's start with the challenges of what you do, and then you can talk about what you like the best.
The challenges for what I do, I would say staying kind of relevant, right? Staying on the edge. Because just like I was saying before, it's easy to kind of sit back and um, and kind of get comfortable. And
Mm-hmm.
so being able to jolt yourself and say, okay, you know what, I have to move forward. I have to learn this stuff, right? Some people are just wired that way where it's okay, you know what, I love this, I have to go out, I have to read this. Um, but for me, I'm not wired that way. And so like I have a passion for it, but it's not something I wake up early in the morning and like, okay, we gotta grind. Like this is a job for me, right? And so, I love doing it, but you consciously have to be looking to see, okay, where's the like what's the trajectory of what I need to learn, right? I need to learn this to better the company, and I also need to learn to better myself, right? So with software developing, okay, I need to make sure that we're on the right track with testing, we're on the right track with, AI, we're on the right track with, the platforms that we're using. And so you're always looking, always trying to make sure, okay, what am I doing to make sure that I stay, on top of what I need to be on. And just said
Mhm.
that's true for on the IT and STEM side. It's also true on the business side, right? You
Yeah.
still always have to be looking, and the second part is also making sure that what you're doing is getting recognized. Not so much because you want to boast or gloat about what you're doing or put your put your stuff out so that everybody can see it, but it's critical that people know that what you're doing is relevant, right? What you're doing brings value, and a lot of times no one knows that unless you actually show them, right? You have to show them
Mhm.
data points to say, okay, this is how you're getting return on your investment here. This is what happened over here. Other than that, you get lost in the shuffle. So that's always a challenge for me because it's just like you said, for me it's tough to do that and bring that forward and to make the connections. And so those are two things that are like always a challenge, like always making sure, okay, don't sleep on this. Go out and read, go out and practice this, so you get better at it. And then also to like, hey, you know what? Look, we built this great thing over here, and it saved a lot of time, saved a lot of money, and we need to make sure that it's recognized.
Hmm. And the favorite part?
Favorite part is seeing what you built and people using it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You know what I
use it.
mean? Yeah, yeah. Seeing the savings, you know, as I said, seeing the return on it, it's always a good thing. It's always a good thing because you're building. We're in R&D, so you build stuff, it gets scrapped. You build stuff, it gets scrapped. You build stuff, it gets scrapped, and that's awesome. It's still because you're building not finished,
Learning.
but yeah, but then you build a couple things and it's like, oh man, you know what? This thing is continually being used. It's continually saving. So, and people are continually happy with it, and so those are things that are really nice.
So remind me what you built. So I really want to get clarity on what you do without you exposing what you do for a living to the whole world. So you work for a pharmaceutical company. Let's say it's a drug company, right? They
Mm-hmm.
make drugs. They develop drugs. So
Mm-hmm.
they are a company overseas that is like equivalent to Merck or Pfizer,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they make drugs. I'm assuming they test drugs,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they have to
So
like do pipetting on cells to see if that drug lowers cholesterol. Am I
yeah.
on the right page? That
So it's a little bit of both. Like I can give an example of what we do at the site here in Orlando, and then maybe a global thing. But for the most part, like in Orlando, um, the one of the reasons that they got acquired is because the company itself, called Vaxdesign, that was acquired. They kind of made like the immune system in a petri dish, right?
mm,
So they could go in and then they can test certain things to see how they reacted, and so trying to do that at scale, required automation, and so essentially that's where the automation process for us began. And so what we're trying to do in in the team that I work on is we're pretty much saying, okay, you know what, we have a specialty in automation design. So when you need to automate something, kind of come to our team, and then we build out the infrastructure and we hand that off. So then the
what is
scientists can
okay?
take.
Before we go there, what do you mean by automate? Automate
So
means
yeah, so think of when if you're a scientist, you may have a cell, right? You may need to do like 4 or 5 different things to that cell, right? And mind you, I'm not a biology major.
mm,
Like for me, I'm here. There's a one person right above
yeah.
me who goes, does the biology, translates it, and then I take it to the software developers. But for
Mhm.
the most part, though, like say for instance with the cell, you have the cell. I can't remember if the harvest comes before that, but you have the cell. Say for instance, you do something to it, you allow it to incubate, then you look at it again at a certain time point, then you do something to it again, and you may want to look at it, at another time point. And so instead of having to do all that stuff, or like, instead of you having to put it in the pot, put it in the well, put it on the shelf, pull it out yourself manually, and then read it, right? The automation machines right now, you kind of set the experiment up,
And the machine does it.
put your things in there. Yeah, it automatically will put it into the incubators. It'll automatically put it into the fridges or freezers. It'll automatically spin it down, or do the centrifuges on it. It'll automatically do all those things. So if you and the way that you have to program them is because the freezer, the liquid handlers, which does the pipetting, the incubators, and all those things, they're different components.
Yeah.
So you essentially have to have a robot in front of them,
Right.
or robots aside, and then you have to kind of make all that stuff kind of dance,
And you
right?
have to program the robot to do that.
Yeah. So you're essentially programming a robot to go put the wells in one machine, then
Yeah.
grab the wells out of another, and then put it in here. And so that's the automation side. And
Uh-huh.
so we build these machines, and then they go out, they run these processes.
Right.
Once the processes are done, we have all like
All this data.
yeah, so it'll go through and it'll chunk the stuff up. And so then we'll go through from there. And
And your job is to create an application to help process that data quickly.
exactly,
Oh my
exactly,
gosh.
exactly,
Wow.
exactly. And so that's what we're always fine tuning, because there's so many different instruments, there's so many different experiments, there's so many different places that the data needs to go. Like there's always some method to how we need to get it from A to B. And yeah, this isn't unique to Sanofi, right? Everybody is trying to find a way to get the data in a spot where it's readable, and understandable, right? Because even if you're not running AI on it, you still need to be able to classify it. You still need to be able to digest it if you want it in the future.
Make a different
There's
type of plan
exactly, and so
and
there's always some.
strategy.
Yeah, so there's always something to do to it, but that's essentially that's what we're doing every
What you
day.
do.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I have a
Mm-hmm.
clear understanding of what you do. And what you do is in the context of life sciences, but in the grocery store, in Amazon, in everything is going towards automation.
Mm-hmm.
And since everything is going toward automation, there's a lot of data being received from it, and there's going to be a need for software developers to process or
Yes.
develop applications to process all everything that's going into that level.
Yes. Yes.
So jump in, y'all. It must be a hot field because, right?
Yeah, it's how I feel. It definitely is. It's definitely in demand. I think that but just like everything else, when you come out of school, it's you got to know something, right? And
Yes.
so I think the one trait that separates software developing from a lot of the other fields, whether it is the MBA, right? Whether it's mechanical engineering, whether it's electrical, whether it is biology, is that you literally can have the skills day one, right? If you read the books, if you take it serious, if you say, okay, you know what, I actually
Mhm.
want to be great at this, right? If you put the time in, you you can you can master the skills almost by yourself without the experience, right? If I interview somebody and they may not have had this ton of experience working, but they spent a year developing their skills, a year practicing.
Yes.
They've taken it serious. That person is almost more valuable to me. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
and I'm kind of over exaggerating it a little bit, but to an extent, it's true, right? Whereas like an electrical engineer or something like that, like you actually have to touch, like you have to kind of practice that before you can say, okay, you know what, I've mastered it. You have to practice it in underneath somebody in a in a in
Get
a in a
licensed.
certain exactly in a certain. But like if I can easily just go get an Azure account, I can easily get an AWS account, I can easily start developing my own programs. I can easily, create my own body of work.
Right
And I
now.
think, yeah, right now. And so that's the thing that, if if we're talking to people that are just starting college or even in high school, right? That's what I would do, right? I think that for me initially, like, you just think, okay, you know what, I'll just pick up a programming language. You hear Python being thrown around, you hear,
Lava.
Java, you hear C sharp, you hear all these things being thrown around. But what is really, really critical are the principles that govern it, right? Object oriented principles like API design, these things right here. So when people are reading books, you can't just read the book on the actual language. You have to read the book on the discipline of
Yeah.
programming, right? And so if you marry the discipline and the actual language, then you're already ahead of the game, right? You're ahead of actually some developers out there, right? There's developers that I talk to, been doing it for 10, 20 years, but yet they still haven't married the principles with the software.
But you know what
Um,
I want to do this last question for you is a
mhm.
little off, but of what I gave you originally. But you're a director of software development. I want you to talk about the skills that you need to move up the ranks of promotion, and we'll close with
Okay.
that because
Okay.
what you're describing to me is a lot of technical stuff, which is how to get into software development.
Hmm.
But I want to also know, like, there are a lot of people who know how to do that kind of stuff, but they can't make it up to the level of promotion. What would you say is the number one skill set is for that?
I would say two things.
Okay.
The first one I would say is it's the same as software developing. So for me, what I did, I always look to see what the next level was doing above me.
Mm,
So even the job that I told you I had where they were doing things super professional and all this stuff, right? I could look to the person that was ahead of me and say, okay, this is why it's super professional because this is how he approaches problems. This is how he does this. This is the skill set that he has. So I need to go get that, right?
mm,
So always look above and say, okay, you know what? That's the skill set I want. This is who's over here. Let me go after that. So the skill set above you is super critical. And it's not enough just to know it. You have to actually, it's the same thing. You got to know discipline. You got to know what it entails, right? You want to be in management, you got to know what transformational leadership is. You got to know, project management. You got to know all this stuff, right? In order to do it effectively. And then the second one is a little more tricky because you have to be flexible,
mm,
right? For me, one of the reasons that I was able to grow in software development is because you know there was a time I took a job in Jacksonville for a year, right? So there was a year I was just going back and forth, and that was before Sanofi, but that was a huge leap for my career,
gotcha.
right? And so being able to do something like that, and I had to do it in conjunction with my wife, right? Because there was one day where I came in the house and was just like, yo, this is crazy, right? I see what programmers are making. Why am I not making that, right? I've already been smart enough. Like one thing that I've noticed too, and this is a dicey one, but with with STEM fields, with programming in general, right? To an extent, it's an equalizer, right? When I get a resume, and for a good company, it's an equalizer. Let's say
Good.
that for a good company, it's an equalizer. So when we get resumes or when we're hiring people, right, there is no, all right, you know what, all right, man, this guy is this or this guy's that. It's literally, can they do the job, right? We have people from all over, and so you have to the ability to take that skill and say, okay, you know what? How can I make this transformative for me? So maybe I need to get a job that's outside of the box. Maybe I'm living in Orlando, but I need to take this job in Phoenix, right? Or maybe there is a job here in Orlando that can stretch me, but you always have to be you have to be flexible while you're building those skills, and what I preach to my son, is that the only way you can be flexible is by doing things in the right order, right? especially
Mhm.
like, and God kind of sets this stuff up too, right? You know
Yeah.
what? Like, you have to make sure that, when you get married, it's at the right time, right? Is your career at the right spot for you to get married? For kids, is it the right time for you to have kids? Is it, where does all this stuff fit in? Because as of right now, if I wanted to take a job in Phoenix, right, it'd be difficult because I would have to,
Uproot.
yeah, I have to uproot. I have kids here, and so it would be more difficult. But I would say the flip side of that too is sometimes people think it's more difficult than it actually is. Like there's some people who literally could uproot and get and be great, but feel that they're tied down.
Mm.
And so you have to be flexible in that regard. But if you're flexible and you're looking up and building the skills, then you most likely will be successful and grow. You know.
Love it. Love it. Love it.
Mm.
Love that. This has been an awesome, awesome, awesome interview. Some of my greatest interviews are with the greatest introverts. And some you just got to give them the voice and the space to speak. And you have spoken, Jamal. I really, really appreciate it. I am the phenomenal STEMist, and so is he. Thanks again, Jamal.
All right.
Good
Thank you,
night,
Maya.
everybody.
All right.